business and academic world, there's a general opinion that not only does the EU not create jobs, or that jobs depend on the EU, but that actually the EU and the government style that goes along with it does create unemployment.
And it does, because the EU affects so much regulation and ties businesses in so much red tape that they are unable to employ the people that they might otherwise employ because they're less profitable. Ultimately, regulation is a cost, and businesses need to be free of this cost to get profit and to employ people and grow their business.
At present, all of our economy, all 100% of the economy, is subject to the rules and regulations of the European Union. But we only sell products and services to the European Union equal to about 14% of our national output. The rules and regulations of the European Union close small businesses, they destroy jobs, they harm our economy. Yes, we do want access to the single market for that 14% of the economy, but we leave the European Union, we can have our own rules, regulations, English law, Scottish law and so on for the remaining 87% of the economy. That 87% of the economy is then liberated from all the rules and regulations that damage, at the moment, our entire economy because we belong to the European Union.
So everyone's come out of the great economic turmoil that the world's seen in recent years, except for the EU. Why is that?
Well, regulation. Regulation, cost, inefficiency. And this regulation, again, is not just made for the UK. It's a standard regulation made for 28 nations across the European Union, which don't have the same economy, don't have the same structure, don't have the same skill base, and are completely different and individual entities in themselves. So regulation, costs, and inefficiency are holding not just the UK, but the European Union back.
Some people believe that the EU is not democratic, but it's run by big businesses. If that's true, then surely the EU would be good for the economy.
Well, the European Union is good for big business in a way that it creates extra regulation, and regulation is big business's friend. It is not, however, the friend of small business that is trying to keep down its cost base, trying to employ more people, trying to get growth in their business and drive a different sort of economy home, to create a different sort of economy. And at the Better Off Out campaign, we believe in free markets. And free markets come with limited regulation and allow for the free movement of people and goods and services around not just the European Union, but the world.
So your restaurants employ a lot of people, and service business like yours do, but what would you say the main obstacles are if you wanted to employ more people?
The bureaucracy of actually employing people is so difficult now because of the leave entitlement, even when it comes down to disciplinaries, trying to get rid of people with the written warnings, the verbal warnings. I had a situation where it cost me £3,500 to actually get rid of somebody that I caught stealing. The rules and regulations of actually employing people now, it's actually gone too far the other way now, where the employer is suffering, not the employee. The employee gets all the rights, the employer has nothing.
A friend of mine who started a business, and he says that the costs of him starting a business are so prohibitively high. For him to open a small low budget cafe and to have music for his customers, he has to pay £1,000 a year for a music license, and another license for this, another license for that, another license for something else. So his costs are so high, he daren't take on a full-time female member of staff because he knows immediately, should she become pregnant, he is liable for that cost.
In the last year I've gone from company to company because I was made redundant in August 2012. We were given no redundancy money, and I've gone from job to job with no permanent contracts. It's very difficult to find full-time work in this day and age because a lot of companies are only handing out 0% contracts, and you've got no certainty of what hours you might get next week. You know, and also you've gone from, say, maybe £8 pay down to just £6.50. It's a big drop in wages as well, trying to get out there and put your foot in the door. Bills are getting higher and we're not able to pay for them. It's really difficult.
So there's a number of foreign businesses who say that unless we continue to be involved in the EU, then they're going to pull out of the UK. What happens if that happens?
Well, I very much doubt that they will pull out of the UK because they've said it all before. In the discussions over the euro, many of these companies, Honda, Nissan, they all said that they'd scale down their operations if the UK didn't join the euro. In fact, they've scaled up their operations in light of us keeping the pound. And so with a more competitive economy, it would be in their interests to stick around. And that competitiveness will come when we repeal the legislation from the European Union. We will, outside the European Union, be able to repeal that and ultimately create a more competitive economy for UK businesses and businesses abroad.
So is there not the possibility that our government could pull out of the EU and then not repeal these regulations? What would happen then?
Well, ultimately it comes down to a democratic argument because the discussions will come back to the United Kingdom. It would be the United Kingdom's members of Parliament and the people of Britain that will be informing the process, making the decisions, not someone in Brussels or Strasbourg or a collective body of nations over there that don't represent the best interests of the United Kingdom. Ultimately, that is a democratic argument. We have the choice. If we're outside the European Union, inside the European Union, we don't.
Yeah, so I've heard that kind of argument before, and it all sounds really rational. But what if the EU does react in an irrational and aggressive way, which is maybe what the Liberal Democrats imply?
Well, we buy more stuff from the European Union than we sell to the European Union. Countries around the EU depend on trade with the UK more than we depend on trade with countries around the European Union. And so, ultimately, with this conversation, it would be in their best interests to keep us on side, keep the free movement of goods and services from the UK to their countries. And jobs depend in these countries on this trade with the United Kingdom. And to put up barriers and to be difficult will ultimately not be in their interests and actually further, potentially, economic distress. And there's something else. The people around Europe don't dislike the United Kingdom. They like to come here, they like to trade with the UK. Ultimately, this is about trade and not anything else. And they don't see a problem with the United Kingdom outside the European Union. If the UK is amenable, if the UK is friendly towards the people and the countries in the European Union.
We get this question about the single market. If we leave the European Union, I'll be cut out of the single market. The single market means a whole mass of rules and regulations. That's really what it means. If British companies sell products, services and so on in China, they must comply with Chinese rules and regulations. If they sell things in the United States, they must comply with American rules and regulations. Okay, but they still can sell products to China and America, even though we don't have some special European Union, some American Union or Chinese Union with these other countries. We're outside the EU. Of course, companies must comply with the regulations involved with exporting to the European Union, but that's all, and life would go on. Just as we don't need to be a state in the United States of America to sell to America, we do not need to be a state in the United States of Europe to sell to Europe. That is one of the key points in this whole argument.